On campus. In case we haven't met, my name is Michael Roseman. I'm the director of the Center for Future Enterprise, and we're delighted to run this seminar series, which occurs every last Tuesday of the month, and with the ambition to make maximum use of the future that we're having. And this is the fourth seminar in this series. I'm delighted to see our groupies, our regulars, and welcome everyone new to this series. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I would love, of course, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the place where we're coming together this afternoon, and pay my respect to the traditional owners of the land we're meeting. That means in our case, the Turrbal and Yaga people, and I acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. This future seminar series is dedicated to sharing understanding about tools, methods, and approaches. We tend to have local speakers, and in the past, we had speakers from Sydney and here, and they were face-to-face. Tonight is the very first time that we do this online, and I'm delighted, and I'm seeing you here, Mariagrazia. Mariagrazia is joining us from Milano. And Mariagrazia, since 20 years or so, maybe typical for Milan, you have worked in the fashion industry, clothing and textile. You studied offshoring, and as part of this travel, spent time, among others, in China. You studied nearshoring more recently, and together with Nicoletta, who sent her apologies, you are dedicated to future foresight and strategic thinking with a focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. We had a chat yesterday, and we said it's a bit like artificial intelligence. Everybody's interested, but the smaller you are, the harder it is to build the resources to invest this topic, and futures literacy might be very similar. So from our side, and now it's early in the morning, buongiorno to Milano. Mariagrazia, if you don't mind, we give you maybe 25, 30 minutes. Take us on a journey. We see you here. I might hand over to Ellie to get the logistics sorted. But we have a room that is eager to listen to you, to learn from you, and after half an hour to discuss with you. So maybe with a bit of an applause, warm welcome from Brisbane to Milan.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the Center for Future Enterprises to having me here. And buongiorno from Milano, because as you know, here it is, we are really in early morning. So buongiorno for me and good afternoon to you. Okay.
Would you like to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay, sure. I'll stop sharing mine so that you can share yours.
Great. Great. Okay. Okay, just a sec. Just a sec, and I share full screen, and just tell me, can you see full screen?
Fabulous. Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great. So thank you again for having me here. Okay, and let's start. Let's start this journey into the future. Okay, again, as Michael said, Nicoletta Boldrini was supposed to be here, and unfortunately, because some, family issue, she cannot be here, and I'm here in her place. I hope this will be good for you as well. Okay, so let's talk about futures and foresight and why it is so important to use future and foresight right now, especially in the era, in the time we are living right now. So this is the structure that we are going to use today to investigate the future. So we'll start from the why, and then we will go to the what, and then how we can do it. But let's start with the why. So you can, I imagine that actually, when you think about the future, especially the future of your community, the future of your neighborhood, and so on, what comes to your mind? Try to ask this question to you. Does it feel for you something which is exciting, or it seems more uncertain, chaotic, and quite hard to predict? Okay, first of all, I want to say to you that when we talk about future, we are not going to predict anything. Futures and foresight is not for prediction, but is for exploration. That's the basics of futures and foresight. And all the people working in this field, we usually say futures does not exist, but we can imagine it. So this is the basic that we have to take into consideration. So no prediction at all, but exploration. That's really, really important. It seems, quite simple and something like this, okay, but no, this is really the basics. We are not going to make any prediction. And that's very important because actually the future is not something which is written. The future is not a destination, but is something that we can explore and that we can really design in the present. So present, it's important to create our future. That's so. And now, why it's important, futures and foresight? Actually, we are used to think about future as something linear, the past, the present, and the future. But something changed. And as you know, but the focus is really not the change. Somebody says, okay, we are living a period, a era of changes. But as you know better than me, changes already happened in every age. Which is the difference right now? Is the speed at which change occurs. That's why it's important. Because in the past, there was a natural adaptation period between an innovation and its adoption in society. Right now, the time is shrinking, sorry. And that's what makes the future so disorienting. And how, the futurist Alvin Toffler, they introduced the term future shock. And how we describe this situation, I can imagine that everybody already, know what VUCA is. But usually we use it to describe, this era. Actually, as you know, VUCA was introduced by the US Army War College in the late 80s. And it describes this kind of world, which is, made of volatility. That means that rapid and predictable changes can disrupt entire industries, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But maybe I'm sure you know about VUCA, but maybe, then you will tell me, maybe you do not know about Barney. Actually, in 2020, a futurist, Jamais Cascio, realized that actually VUCA no longer fully describes the today's realities. And he designed this Barney. But what does it mean? Brittle, anxious, non-linear. I always stress non-linear. You see that before we said we were used to think in a linear way, past, present, and future. Right now, changes happen so rapidly, and we live in a world which is non-linear. But why do I stress nonlinear? Even because this is very important for the future thinking mindset. You have to think in a circular way because future is in the present is in the future. The past is in our present and will be in our future. And it's very important because when we work with foresight and during foresight participatory workshops, we always try to help people thinking in a non-linear way. For instance, I don't know if somebody already had the chance to experience participatory foresight workshops, but I make an example. Maybe you've already heard about it, the three horizons, and it's quite, for me, I really like actually the three horizons framework, and it's really easy to understand the non-linear thinking of the futures and foresight in the three horizon, because you have got horizon 1, horizon 2, and horizon 3. Horizon 1 usually is the present. Then I go to the horizon 3, which is the envisioning preferable future. And then you go back to horizon 2, which is that liminal space, that bridge that helps you going from the present to the future. But when we work on the present, we ask our participants to think about the emerging issues. Let's say how, we say the seeds of the future in the present. And when we try to envision future, our preferable, because there we work with our preferable future, we bring something from the present that we want to keep in our future. So it's a work back and forth, past, future, then we go back to the present. That's why I always try to stress this non-linear. Is very important when we work with a future thinking mindset. And actually, here you have a better explanation again. And how actually we do navigate uncertainty and complexity, because that's what we have to do. How do we learn what we do not know? And here it comes, our imagination. Because we need actually a new mindset. We need to use a capability. Now we'll go through later, but I like how Riel Miller, the former head of future literacy and foresight and UNESCO, he always says that futures literacy is not a tool, is a capability. It's a capability to use imagination to explore and imagine different possible futures. Very important thing again. So non-linear, it's important, the terminology. Non-linear, and now I'm saying futures. Because when we think about the future, we have to think in a plural way. So imagination is definitely important because it is a metacognitive capability that we have to learn to use. We are not talking about fantasy actually, but it's about creating mental spaces where we can explore alternative futures. That's important. But we try to explore alternative futures before they actually happen. That's the way. So we do not predict just one future. No prediction at all, exploration. And why should we explore? To try to be more resilient, to try to anticipate and to imagine and create in the present already the basis for our preferable future. That's the point. Here it is, we already talked about Real Miller and Transforming the Future, Anticipation in the 21st Century. It's really a book that I suggest you to read if you want to deepen the futures literacy, especially the futures literacy. It's basic for us, actually. It's quite important. And actually, Riel Miller underlines the importance that imagination creates a break, a discontinuity, that's the word, between what we perceive as a reality and the alternative possibilities. So, another important thing here is challenges our assumption and reframe our assumptions to create alternative futures. That's the point. And why anticipation? Because we have to anticipate in the present with agency. I'll try, to send to you all those, words, the vocabulary that we usually use. So non-linear, to explore the future, or well, to explore futures. And anticipation, imagination, futures literacy as a capability, not a tool. I underline this. And agency, because we have the power to change our future. So, you see, we already talked about this. So we have a full range of possibility. So probability versus possibility and forecast versus foresight. But, okay, this is a nice slide, just that can help you better understanding what we mean about, predictability, probability, and possibilities. Okay, in the 1894, the Times of London made an article, okay, and said in 15 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure. But 1894, just go a little bit forward. What happened? What happened there? Everybody knows. Okay, so everybody knows actually because the technological advancement, and we had the first cars, So this is forecasting, let's say, basing on the data we have from the past and the future, and we try to predict just one single future without taking into consideration the emerging issues, the weak signals, some other words which are very important in the futures and foresight. Emerging issues and weak signals that we have to take into consideration, and we have to study and explore in the present. Before, when I explained to you how the 3 horizons works, I said in the present we have the seeds of future. When we talk about seeds of future, we talk about emerging issues. We talk about weak signals, which are very important to be explored. So, what happened? They did not take into consideration those signs that already happened, like in 1770, the first steam-powered vehicle, in 1876, the invention of the internal combustion engine, and in 1886, actually, Carl Benz created what is now considered actually the first car. But they did not take into consideration. That's a nice example to try to better understand the difference of the linear way of thinking, past, present, future, and just relying on forecasting, okay, and a different way, a different mindset, trying to take into consideration those emerging signs, okay? Actually, let's go here. Actually, we are not saying that forecast is something bad, okay? No way. Now I go back, sorry. No way. But now, considering what I told you before, that, because of the speed of changes, everything changes in a blink of an eye. So forecast is fine. We have to use forecast. We have to use forecasting. We have to use data, but we have to be aware that those data can help us imaging and exploring future for, you see here, for maybe 1 year, 2, 3 years, and then no more. So we have to use different methods. That's why here, forecast, instead of forecasting, we can use for futures and foresight. We usually use, this is quite important, it might be interesting for you, because we use usually futures and foresight, especially to work with companies. And when you work with companies, corporate foresight, you usually make an exploration to 10, 15 years. Then if you want to make exploration to 25, 30 years and so on, you go on the speculative futures. But when we work with companies that they need to act very quickly, we have to focus on the plausible futures more than on the speculative futures, okay? That's something quite technical. That's it's more on the field of those who work on futures and foresight. But I think it's quite important to try to understanding the mindset which is behind the future thinking and futures and foresight. So here you have got some example, that with forecast, we have actually a quantitative analysis, while with foresight, it's important to say, we have got a qualitative analysis, okay? And another very important thing, and in foresight, we have got anticipatory visions, as I told you before. So we explore possible and alternative futures. While usually with forecast, we have just one probable future. And with futures and foresight, we explore a range of factors to try to build scenarios. And to build scenarios, those factors that we try to explore are the emerging issues, the weak signals signals I was talking to you before. And then, as I told you before, forecasting focuses on the short term. That's really one of the main differences. Quantitative analysis and focuses on the short term. 3 years, and then it depends on the fields you work with, because actually when we talk about technology, usually sometimes it's even 6 months, 1 year, okay? While futures and foresight need really to be even effective, need to take a longer term view. Starting from 5, but usually we work on 10, 15, average, we work on 10, 15, and then even longer, 30 years ahead. But something that I will going to explain to you later. When we talk about exploration to the 30 years ahead, usually we talk about research, speculative futures. While again, I stress this thing, when we work with companies, we usually work in the, 5, 10, 15 years. Okay, the con of futures. We always use the con of futures to try to explain it, but I know that you already had a lesson with Professor Warus, so, I'm a little bit, since you already had Boris, I don't want to say anything else about this, because actually, as you know, he designed an extended version that is now used by practicing and futurists and practitioners. But all the people working in futures and foresight always refer to the futures con, because it's very clear to try, and it really explains how futures and foresight works. Because you see here my screen on the left hand side is the present, as you know, and we are used to think, in a linear way, past, present, okay, which is the future, the probable future, most likely to happen. But we have to take into consideration this one. Well, I'm not saying that we do not have to take in consideration. We have to take into consideration. We have to use foresight. Forecasting. We have to take into consideration the probable future, but we do not have to stop there. That's the point. We have to explore different possible futures as much as we can, and then try to find which are the preferable futures for us. For me, for you, I might have a different preferable future from you. And once we have made the exploration on different possible futures, then we find our preferable future, and there we start making a roadmap to try to anticipate our preferable future. Something that you do not see here, but I wanted to stress again, because as Michael said before, I'm used to work with companies. I used to work with big companies in the past, and right now I work mainly with SMEs, with small and medium companies, and even very tiny one, micro, nano companies, because in Italy we have, a huge number of small companies. Here you do not see, but there is what we call the plausible future. The plausible future is one of the possible futures, but it's that kind of future that might happen Why? Because we do not only see weak signals that might lead to the plausible future, but we even have very strong signals, especially from a political point of view and from the point of view of the norms. We have to take into consideration the norms. What are they studying, and when this kind of norm will be enforced? Maybe in 5 years? Okay, let's take into consideration this is plausible. And it's very important working with the plausible future, especially when we work with companies, so in corporate foresight. So now, very important is what? So, what's behind everything we have discussed so far? We have talked about the ability to anticipate change. We have talked about, to break free from rigid assumption already. And here we are. Let's clear, let's try to clarify, because I think that, you heard about future studies, you heard about future thinking, you heard about futures literacy, and so on. But sometimes you say, okay, which is the right word? Which is the right vocabulary to be used? Okay, to make it short, the reason if you want to deepen this point, I'll suggest you to check the website and even all the documentation of the Copenhagen Institute for the Future. They have a nice slide where they put, future studies from one side, then they put foresight on the other side, and they said, okay, here in the liminal space, let's say in the transition, but it's not actually transition. They use the same tools. So either you are an academic and you work with future studies, or you are a foresight practitioner, more like me, you use the same tools. Exactly the same. So future studies is the foundation of the theories, the methods, and all these things. And let's say future studies is for the academy, university, to make research. Futures and foresight actually is the contemporary evolution of the anticipatory thinking, and foresight is more to, we say actually, corporate or strategic foresight, just to work with companies. And then, very important, we've got futures literacy. And again, Riel Miller says, futures literacy is not a tool. Futures literacy is a capability. And according to UNESCO, futures literacy is one of the most important capabilities of the 21st century. But what is actually futures literacy? Is the capability to understand, analyze, and use the future in the present. Is the capability to use our imagination, to imagine possible different futures. So futures literacy. In case you would like to learn something more about futures literacy, I remind you to the book of Riel Miller, but even try to attend a futures literacy lab. There are some futures literacy labs even online. I make an example, Stefan Bergen, who was actually worked at the book of Real Miller, worked together with Real Miller, and he sometimes he holds Futures Literacy online lab. It's quite interesting because you learn to challenge your assumption and to reframe assumption in order to explore different possible futures. And then obviously we have got the future thinking, which is a mindset. This, future thinking is a mindset. Future studies, academic. Foresight, more corporate. Futures literacy is the capability to use our imagination. And futures and foresight is the contemporary evolution of the anticipatory thinking. And then we have got the design futures, which is an interdisciplinary field that merges futures and foresight with design thinking and speculative design. And when we talk about design futures, usually you find examples of design futures again in university. I can make an example here in Italy, and especially in Milan, at Politecnico of Milan, which, one of the most famous universities in Italy, and not only in Italy, but even worldwide. There is a department of design, and they work with speculative design and design futures. I'm not saying that companies cannot work with design futures, okay? But as we already know, companies need to be very practical, and that's why, we work more with foresight when we work with company. So how we do what I explained to you up to now. And this is a very important slide because this is the structure, actually. This is the structure of how we work. So first of all, we already talked about emerging issues, weak signals. And how we do, we scan. We make an environmental scanning and we make an horizon scanning, which is the difference, this is very important. Environmental scanning, usually, to make it, shorter, is the scanning of the mega trends, is the scanning of the trends. Horizon scanning is the scanning of weak signals. This is the first part, is the starting, but that's very, very important. Without the driving forces that we can find in the environmental scanning and the horizon scanning, no exploration is possible. Then we make an analysis of the impacts and the link, and then we start exploring possible futures and preferable or desired future. And then, as I told you before, once we understand which is our desirable futures, okay, then we make a strategy. We create a strategy, and then we have to take action. We have to plan. But very important, this is a continuously iterative process. We have to continuously look for signals and try to understand how these signals are going on, okay? Because there are signals that might become trends. There are signals that might become mega trends, and there are signals that might die. And that's important. We have to see how, our present is evolving and to, adjust our future. Okay. Now I try to make it short, Michael, because I realize which is at 8:15. Otherwise, we do not have time to talk. Okay, so this is another example of a 5-module foresight process to stress actually the test of public policy, but actually is the same, is the same structure that I showed to you before. And then we have finished. This is actually the part of Nicoletta, because Nicoletta, she's an expert of emerging technology, and this is quite important. This is the ETS, how to try to make a scanning of the emerging technologies, which is actually an horizon scanning. But emerging technology scanning is emerging as a fundamental practice within future studies because of, technology and the rapid change of technology. So this is a sort of horizon scanning with focus on technology, ETS. That's what you have to take into consideration. This is important to identify, evaluate, and monitor emerging technology. Okay, so again, is the horizon scanning focused on the technologies? You see, and I want to just to show you the method. So you identify technology first. So the first step is actually to identify which technology are really emerging. Then you make an analysis and evaluation, using the same structure that I showed to you before. And you keep on monitoring, but you keep on monitoring and you try to create scenarios using the driving forces, those emerging signals, weak signals that you explored. So, just to stress the importance. So the effectiveness actually of ETS is measured actually about the ability to influence strategic and operation decision. So ETS might help to prevent obsolescence, identify opportunities, reduce uncertainty, and drive innovation. But there are even challenges because there might be an information overload, the rapid change that we talked before, and even complexity. So we have to take into consideration. So now we have got, I'm sorry if I was a little bit longer, but in any case, I think we still have 15 minutes, I feel. So thank you to you. I hope it was interesting for you, and I'm ready to chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Grazie mille, Mariagrazia. That was wonderful. And you talked about an imaginative future, and you had to imagine an audience, because I realized the camera looked at an empty stage here. That was very insightful and very educational. I like how you differentiate foresight from forecast, VUCA from Barney, and prediction from exploration. And I guess when you asked the very first question, what sort of city do you imagine? Many people here in Brisbane imagine Brisbane 2032, where we have sort of a shared narrative around a shared future, where we host the Olympics. Time after the microphone, and I promise to Mariagrazia, if there are any translation problems, happy to translate. Any questions, comments from anyone? Viv.
Thank you, Maria. That was a great presentation. My question is, when you work with SMEs, what are the biggest challenges do you see in terms of imagination crisis, which smaller companies have because they're always executing on minor details?
Thank you for your question. Okay, you focused on the point. That's the problem. No, actually, as you know, foresight is usually used by big companies. But as I said to you before, the 99% of companies in Italy are SMEs, and mainly micro and small companies. So what we are trying to do, not only myself, obviously, even other practitioners and futurists, we are trying to help them imagining some different futures, which is not easy, as you said, because can you imagine a small company, a micro company of about 5 employees? They do not have time. They do not have time. But I want to make you one example. Okay, as Michael said before, I come from the textile and clothing field. So now in Europe, a big change in the field is undergoing. Is a change of paradigm, definitely. I try to be, more precise and making example because I think this might help. So in 2022, the European Commission adopted the new strategy for circular and sustainable textile. And everything is going to change within 2030. So since 2022, I started organizing and holding some Futures and Foresight workshops for SMEs to try to let understand how this strategy might impact on their business in the future. Well, what happened? That a couple of companies, I'm not saying many, a couple of companies that attended my workshops, at the end, they were scared. They said, oh, gosh, one of the possible future is that we disappear. We have to do something right now. Okay? And some of them, for instance, they decided to adopt on a voluntary basis the digital product passport, which is one of the devices that the European Commission is asking to adopt by 2030. Well, right now, we have got companies, micro companies that attended my workshop. I'm really proud of that, I have to tell you. I'm really proud. They already adopted on voluntary basis the digital product passport. They anticipated. And how they did, because it's very difficult to imagine a future, they put themselves in the scenarios. That's the point. When we work with Futures and Foresight, if we want to help individuals or companies, and especially micro companies, SMEs in general, to try to imagine and to try to anticipate, we as facilitators, we have to push them to imagine themselves and their companies in the futures they are exploring. It's not easy, but that's a point. And I made this example. I hoped I answered to your question, because I think that this really can explain how micro companies, even and SMEs, can, take advantage of Futures and Foresight.
Thank you so much. It was well articulated. Further questions or comments from anyone? Maybe yes, this one.
I wonder if there's any tension that you see in terms of the need to have imaginative capability in order to navigate the future, and the sorts of things that we have historically valued in terms of leadership.
Sorry, Maybe I have not well understood the question. Can you repeat, please? Sorry.
Yeah.
About the
So I suppose my question is coming from the experience of working in the public sector.
okay.
A lot of what we see in terms of valuing leadership is around extensive experience, but I'm not sure what sort of measures or things we have in place for being able to understand how well, in terms of leadership capability, people are able to navigate or imagine an uncertain future. So I'm wondering if this kind of work around needing to emphasize the importance of imaginative capability to navigate the future then changes what we should be valuing in terms of leadership to take us into that future.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you for repeating the question to me. Thank you. Yes, actually, when we think about imagination and creativity, is really a soft skill that is needed for a question of leadership. I make an example. I did not put it in the presentation, but if you go and check the World Economic Forum, the Futures of Work, and the edition of 2023, and there is really a scheme of the capabilities, the most important capabilities from 2023 to 2027, and creativity as at the first place according to the World Economic Forum. So really, when we talk about leadership, imagination and creativity should be used. And it's something that, we have to try to push our leaders to be more creative. That's not easy, okay? That's not easy. I can see it in Europe. That's not easy. I don't know if it can help, but I can tell you, for instance, at the European level in 2018 and 2019, the European Commission established a unit on foresight. And the European Commission is pushing in order to try to help try to use futures and foresight methodology even in the public sector and with SMEs. I even work as a project manager, I can tell you, for an European project created by the European Commission, which is Enterprise Europe Network. And the European Commission is pushing us to try to help SMEs being more resilient using this kind of methodology. So yes, creativity should be used in leadership, but it's not easy. We have to tell the truth. We have to try to do as much as we can.
Thank you. It was a great question. I think in 2 months we've got Peter presenting. He talks about learning from the future. So you mentioned the future with new kind of leadership skills, and the question is how do I build skills to get to that dimension?
Yeah.
So that might be of interest. Was there one more final question, Irvin? Or then maybe last question over there in the back.
Actually, my question just builds on that last one. Is when you're thinking about leadership capabilities, creativity is almost in contradiction to being a subject matter expert. So I guess I'm wondering, it almost makes becoming a leader even harder. And I guess I'm just thinking, if you're looking forward for your career, do you become a subject matter expert, or do you become a creative, imaginative, open leader? Like, where's the work going to be?
Okay, so thank you for the question. Actually, creativity, it's important, as I said before, to imagine different futures. But it's a way, let's think about futures literacy. Okay, is a literacy. So you learn to use your imagination. There is something structured even with creativity. Okay, so is a different way to try to navigate complexity. So that's why we have to use imagination and creativity. Even if we say, okay, as I said before, we do not have to think about fantasy. It's not fantasy. Creativity in the sense of imagine and exploring different futures compared to the usual probable one. So it's a skill that is needed to try to open the range, widen the range of possibilities. That's the focus. Let's try not to make confusion with fantasy, okay? Imagination, creativity is needed to widen the range of futures in order to navigate complexity. I don't know if I answered, but it's not easy actually to try to explain how we use imagination and creativity, which is a little bit different from, the usual way of thinking about imagination and creativity.
Thank you, Mariagrazia. And I think what you said also is, if you're using creativity, you have the potential to become tomorrow's subject matter expert.
Can I add one?
Sorry, I cannot hear you. I'm really sorry. I cannot hear you very well because I think because of the microphone. So you say that a potential.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add one thing to what Michael said, which is, I've got 10 years experience and it's always been a SME, you go into a grad job and I've always been an imaginative, creative person, but that's always been not valued. And so it's like when you're trying to get, if you're an established leader, you can get creative and innovative and that becomes valued, but how do you get into positions where maybe it's just society needs to start valuing creativity more and we're just not there yet?
Okay.
That was probably more of a comment than a question. I think it lines quite nicely with that sort of narrative that we really need a complete new young generation where your day-to-day activity can be to be creative and with this contribute to futures literacy. That was a really insightful conversation. I hope, Mariagrazia, your slides can be made available. But I can.
Yes, sure.
We build sort of this cumulative body of knowledge from session to session, and I hope that in your own mental mind you add up these sort of puzzle pieces to become indeed a futures expert. Again, Mariagrazia, I'm very much aware that face-to-face is different to online, but you did a tremendous job early in the morning in Milano for not only educating us, but also inspiring us. So from all of us, thank you so much for making this on a very short notice. We are grateful.
Thank you to you.
Please send our regards
really thank you
to Nicoletta. We hope to stay in touch and we send you all the best wishes from the other side of the world. For those in the audience, I'd like to highlight the next session will be in 3 weeks on the 21st of October when Stefan Hajkovic, probably known to some of you for the last at least 10 years here in Brisbane, has done a lot of future foresight, scenario planning for public and private sector, a high impact individual. And he will talk about their kind of work, their kind of methods using a number of case studies. So that will add quite nicely. It's probably less about creativity and more about sort of the methods around scenario planning and what it means for entire sectors and organizations within that sector. I do apologize, but it might not be appropriate 8 in the morning in Milano. But for those in the room, we have drinks and finger food to continue the networking opportunity. We hope one day, Mariagrazia, we'll see you here in Brisbane or in Milano. But again, from all of us, thank you so much. You have a beautiful day.
Thank you to you. Have a beautiful day and enjoy your your finger food there, even for me. Bye bye.
We
Thank
will.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.